From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. Our top story, President Joe Biden spent just over an hour fielding questions in his first formal news conference of his presidency. As Natalie Brand reports from the White House, the president addressed a number of issues, including the pandemic, the situation at the southern border, and his next major initiative.
In his first official news conference since taking office, President Biden announced he's doubling his initial goal on coronavirus vaccines.
We will, by my 100th day in office, have administered 200 million shots in people's arms.
The president faces multiple challenges at once, including what many call a crisis on the southern border, with the surge of unaccompanied children entering U.S. custody poised to reach an all-time high this month.
I make no apologies for ending programs that did not exist before Trump became president.
The president took the podium Thursday less than 24 hours after North Korea fired what U.S. officials believe were 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan.
There will be responses if they choose to escalate, but I'm also prepared for some form of diplomacy, but it has to be conditioned upon the end result of denuclearization.
A question that elicited one of the most passionate responses was on the topic of state legislative efforts to restrict voting rights. President Biden saying it's un-American and sick.
I'm convinced that we'll be able to stop this because it is the most pernicious thing. This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
The president also signaled he could be open to changes to the filibuster, which requires 60 votes to pass legislation in the Senate, something that would help him pass big items on his legislative agenda. He said the next major initiative will be infrastructure. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
During that news conference, President Biden spent several minutes tackling questions on the crisis at the southern border. And tomorrow, Montana U.S. Senator Steve Daines will get a first-hand look, a situation for which he blames the Biden administration. I spoke with Daines before the senator took off for the border. The number of illegal crossings at the U.S.-Mexico border is again surging, with scenes like this repeated over and over and over.
President Biden sent a message to Central America and Mexico that the southern border is open. And that's tragic because the victims here oftentimes are children. This is a crisis and it needs to be addressed. Sadly, I haven't seen President Biden go down the border.
Montana U.S. Senator Steve Daines will get a first-hand look at the situation Friday when he visits the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, which has been called ground zero for the flood of migrants coming into the country illegally. Daines, like most other Republicans, is putting the blame squarely on the Biden administration.
So this is a crisis for our country. And it really started on day one when President Biden reversed 2 really important Trump policies. That was, 1, he stopped the border wall construction, which sent a clear message that we're not serious about securing the southern border. And 2, he reversed the Remain in Mexico policy.
And even though what is happening on the southern border is more than 1,000 miles away from Montana, Daines says we're feeling the effect in a devastating way.
We are seeing a flood of Mexican heroin, Mexican fentanyl, Mexican meth coming into Montana. The purity levels that these Mexican cartels are creating with methamphetamines is north of 90%. Years ago, it was homemade meth in Montana that had purity levels less than 30%.
By far, the majority of the people who are coming across are not bringing meth in their backpack. They're not criminals. They're trying to find a better life for their families.
Yeah, well, what's happening is the Mexican cartels are actually leading these human trafficking efforts. They're estimated to be making $14 million a day with human trafficking. And so because the border is flooded with these illegal immigrants, it takes our Border Patrol officers off their task of having to try to stop the drugs because they're trying to stop the flood of illegals. And it's allowing the drugs to come in more freely, and that directly affects the state of Montana.
I had a chance to see the situation firsthand. Almost exactly 2 years ago, in March of 2019, I journeyed to the southern border to cover Senator Jon Tester's trip there. I was able to break away and spend time alone with Border Patrol agents, where the scene was much the same as it is now, a constant game of cat and mouse, with some trying to get away and others trying to be caught. I even captured video of smugglers bringing families across the border.
Something that you guys just got something a lot of people, reporters don't get, and that's a wrap.
Yeah, that is a wrap. That's not how they came over.
They are from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala.
How long was the trip here?
¿Cuánto tardaron en llegar aquí desde sus países originales?
Un mes.
It took her 1 month.
Un mes.
1 month.
3 semanas.
3 weeks. ¿Cuánto te tardaste?
3 semanas.
3 weeks.
Why did you want to come here?
¿Para qué querían venir acá?
Para buscar un futuro mejor. Necesito que me den permiso de estar porque necesito trabajo. Tengo mis hijos, tengo 5 hijos. Y soy madre soltera.
They're looking for a better life, and she's a single mother, and she's looking to look for work so she could put her child, so that their child can grow up here and have a better life.
What will you do now? Yes, then what will they do now?
¿Y qué van a hacer ahora? They don't know.
I think that we're seeing a surge right now, which indicates that it's worse right now. But we've seen surges during the Trump administration where the same things have happened. And I think the key is to develop a long-term plan with good border security provisions in it. And then ultimately, we need to pass an immigration bill here in Congress, too, that I think gives folks a pathway to citizenship where they obey the law. Don't jump the line, learn English, and wait their turn.
How difficult do you think that is going to be given the current climate?
It's going to be very difficult because, once again, the border is being highly politicized.
There's reforms are needed in immigration policies in our country, and I hope that we can see some kind of bipartisan solution. But the first thing we have to do, though, is get back to securing the southern border. I think the best illustration I heard is when the roof is leaking, you don't think about a remodel project. You first fix the leaking roof.
Well, Daines is one of a group of 18 Republican senators who will be on that tour of the border. Wyoming Senator John Barrasso also announced that he's going along. Governor Greg Gianforte says he wants the state of Montana to do a better job of serving the needs of the state's farmers and ranchers. Gianforte spoke in Helena today to highlight Montana Agriculture Week. He also held a roundtable this week to hear from producers on what the state could do to assist them. Gianforte pointed to several of the priorities he says will help ag businesses, including removing some state regulations, supporting training and meat cutting, and providing more exemptions to the business equipment tax.
Our producers drive our state's #1 industry. Despite that, they haven't always felt like they've had their voices heard in Helena. We're committed to changing that.
Gianforte also said he wants to work with the legislature on ways to highlight the Montana brand for wheat, beef, and other products that come from the state. Well, the woman accused of hitting a whitefish child with her vehicle as the child was getting off a school bus was back in court today. Patricia Berliner was the driver of that vehicle that hit 6-year-old Jordana Hubble in November of 2019. She entered the Alford plea in the Flathead County District Court. Berliner had originally pleaded not guilty to a charge of felony criminal endangerment in April of 2020, and later that case was referred to mediation over a jury trial. Now, by entering an Alford plea, Berliner does not admit to the criminal act and asserts innocence, but acknowledges that there was evidence for conviction if the case had gone to trial. Hubble began the long road to recovery at Nexus Children's Hospital in Houston and now continues her treatment at home. Berliner's sentencing is now set for June 10th. All right, turning to Chief Meteorologist Ed McIntosh. Ed, a weather system moving through the area. You've been keeping an eye on the mountains and foothills.
That's right. That's where we're really going to see the emphasis tonight. And those are the shaded areas. The Bighorns, Priors, maybe 4 to 8 inches. Already seeing snow into the Red Lodge foothills, up to a foot possible in the higher peaks, and the Paradise Valley also being affected. Here's some pictures from around the region. Red Lodge, this was a little while ago. You can see the wet streets there. Bridger Bowl picking up some snow. I grabbed that one just before the sun went down. down. Bozeman Pass slowing traffic down with some slick conditions. And then Cook City, there's some snow on the ground. And in addition to that, this was a video I grabbed a couple of moments ago from around Red Lodge Mountain near the golf course. So the snow is coming down, and it's going to affect a good portion of the region, including some scattered rain and snow for the lower elevations. We'll take a closer look at that coming up in a few minutes.
All right, thank you, Ed. It's time now to roll out a new menu on Billings West End. The Montana-based restaurant Hokkaido is known for its ramen and sushi bar. Q2's newest reporter, Brandon Warren, brings us a sample of what you'll find inside.
What do green onions, eggs, and pork all have in common? They're all ingredients of some of the finest ramen around. Hokkaido recently opened in the Shiloh Crossing area. With a menu consisting of sushi and ramen, the secret is in the broth.
All the bones, we're going to bake them first, and then we get all the blood out, and then we're going to rinse them, and also put in the hot water, boil them about like 10 hours. And then you got a creamy looking and tastes really thick, and it's really healthy. A lot of nutrition inside of the broth. Chicken ramen.
With a new set of flavors, locals are excited for the shop's opening.
I really like that it's close to the movie theater. I can grab some ramen and be full and go to the movies.
Even the younger generation is getting on board with the cuisine. What did you think?
She goes, good.
Attention to detail and not cutting any corners is what leads the shop to success.
So as long as you really focus to doing something, and you really keep your eye on that, and you use your heart to make something really carefully, make it really high quality, I think that's the secret.
In Billings, Brandon Warren, MTN News.
Thank you, Brandon. Brandon tells us that plans are in the works to open another restaurant in the Billings Heights. They also have locations in Bozeman and Helena. There's a new bill at the state legislature designed to help the state's largest utility buy up more of the Colstrip coal-fired coal plants and keep them running for many years to come. But critics say it's another huge, expensive blank check for Northwestern Energy, one that could stick electric ratepayers with excessive cost well into the future. Senate Bill 379 spells out in law how Northwestern can charge electric ratepayers in Montana for any additional Colstrip power that it would acquire from other co-owners of the plants. Those co-owners, utilities in Washington, Oregon, and Utah, are planning to exit the plants, putting them at risk of closure. The sponsor of SB 379, Republican State Senator Steve Fitzpatrick of Great Falls, says Northwestern needs to be able to recover costs for power purchase agreements. He also says Colstrip Power and the plants are a vital asset for Montana. But former Public Service Commissioner Tom Schneider said today that the bill essentially bars regulators from evaluating the acquisition and saddles ratepayers with above-market costs.
It's ludicrous if they acquire additional shares of unneeded power from Colstrip. The ratepayers under this carve-out legislation will be responsible for everything. Removes prudence standards, removes any review by the commission, and values it at an extraordinarily high price.
Senate Bill 379 is one of several bills before the current legislature meant to bolster the Colstrip power plants and in some cases to undermine development of renewable clean energy projects. Coming up tomorrow, MTN News will take a closer look at the spectrum of bills. Well, still ahead on the MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2, a day after the Billings Clinic dropped its support behind a new medical school. One Billings partnership announces they'll continue to back the project. We'll have the details on that. Then a little later in sports, a Cinderella story. Wayne Tinkle has Oregon State busting brackets. We'll let you know what makes this such a special Sweet 16 matchup.